In this part of the tutorial, I want to show you how to create your own games with the CDG4E game creator. To get started, just click on Editor and then go to New Game. The first step you have to make is to go through these settings here on the left and define, for instance, the game name or the category. But don't worry, of course you can change everything later. So for the tutorial, I want you to create a game that is getting students into gardening, but also into science. So I'll choose a game name that shows others a little bit about the content of my game. Then you need to pick a category. For instance, biology. And here you can add a description that tells a little bit about your game. So in this game, I want to put the players into the role of a gardener who wants to become famous with her first gardening blog, theawesomegardener.com. Here you can put in credits. I'll put in my name and my affiliation. So the next important step is to add resources to your game. The resources are always displayed at the top of the game. For each card you create in the game, you can specify how the decisions you make will affect the resources. So let's add a resource to the game. As you can see here, you need a resource name. You have a minimum value and a maximum value and a start value. My first resource will be popularity. Let's say I'll start with maybe 10, and the maximum value is 100 and the minimum is 0. And what else do I experience as a gardening blogger? Maybe we have a resource that is about gardening skills. Maybe I even have 50. And then that's another resource. One could be the science. So let's add another resource where we want to reflect the money that is available for you in order to run the blog. I'll just type in money, and here we could add like actual numbers that are referring to the amount of, for instance, euros we have here, and we can set a maximum, for instance, on 50,000 and the start value on 500. And last but not least, here you don't have to, but you can add flags. I'll define a flag here, and I will show you afterwards within the Game Creator tutorial how that works. Let's create a flag that is called cats. Okay, now we set all those values, put in all the data on the left side. I click on Save. and we can get started. One important thing I want to add here before we get started is that we are now in the random mode of the game creator. If you click on random, you can switch to story mode. Let's just switch it. It looks a bit different here. I'll get into that later in another part of the tutorial. For now, it's just important to know that in the story mode, you are able to create linear stories with these steps here on the left. And you can also add chapters to your game. Let's switch back to the random mode. Within the random mode, you see there are only random cards that you can put into play. There's one start card, one end card, one default end card, and you can here add more end cards to the game. I'll show you afterwards how that works. I would highly recommend to choose the type of the mode you want to use within your game before you get into the game creation, especially if you want to go back from the story mode to the random mode, because if you switch back to the random mode, your steps will be deleted. And I would also recommend to start with the random mode when you get first into game creation, and later also try out the story mode and create another more linear, maybe more complex game. But you will see that also the random mode is quite powerful here, using flags and conditions. So, okay, let's get started. So this card gets displayed when you start the game. I would recommend to use this card to explain to the players what the game is about, what they have to do, get them into the mood, get them into the role they are playing within the game. On your card, you can also add an icon. And here you can choose from a bunch of predefined icons. You can also add choices and define what happens when you swipe the card to the left or to the right. For the first card, I'll just skip the choice option and just enter what happens after the first card. So we can have a look now how the first card is getting displayed. So it says new garden block, you just created your new block, you're somegardener.com, decide which garden projects you want to realize and which posts you want to share on your blog. Have fun. And at the top of the screen, you see the resources that we defined within the settings. And when I just swipe to the right, it displays the message you put into on the left part of the card. Of course, now we go straight to the end card because we didn't define any random cards in between. So let's create the first random card. Just click on the plus sign here, click on the card, and now you can enter a title, the text, and go into the choices again, change the icon, and then on the bottom you also see you can add conditions. We'll look at it later, and you can add an effect. So I just create a card and explain everything afterwards. So this part of the game is about what your next block entry should be about. So either about Raspberry Pi or Raspberry Pi. And here on this card, you can write down what should be displayed as a text when you choose the left option or the right option. And what's even more important is to add effects here. So what do you want to tell your players if they choose the left or the right option? For instance, I can say when you are blogging about Raspberry Pi on a gardening blog, that could be quite interesting for your users. So maybe your popularity increases and your gardening skills are getting up a little bit, and your money, because the projects of course cost a little bit, goes down for, let's say, put in 100 euros. And here on the right option, you made a Raspberry Pi, a delicious Raspberry Pi. Your popularity stays maybe the same because, or goes up a little bit, but there are so many Raspberry Pi recipes already in the internet. Maybe you don't want to point out that's too much. And there your money goes down also a little bit, but not too bad. Maybe just let's say 15 euros. Of course, it's not very well polished yet, but just to get you an impression on how the game works. So here you have your first card, and I'll just create 3 more cards. So I now created 2 more cards, and let's create another card where I can show you how flags are working. This card could be on the choice whether you want to adopt a garden cat or not. So I just entered 2 choices. At one choice you don't adopt the garden cat, and at the other choice you do. So here we can define what happens when you adopt the cat. Let's say your conscience goes up a little bit, and you maybe also lose, of course, a little bit of money because you have to bring it to the doctor first. At least it's a stray cat and you need to look after her. And what's interesting here now is that you can add, you can define whether your choice has an effect on one of your flags. And we created a flag cat before, and on default a flag is false. And now we say if we choose to adopt this cat, we set this flag on true. And this way you can create cards that have the condition that the flag is true, the flag cat is true. So you can create cards that only come into play when in your game you have a cat. So let's create another card that only comes into play when you have a cat. So here you can set a condition. The flag cat is true, so this card comes only into play when the flag cat is true. And let's say here you have the option to name your cats. And now, of course, you could now choose to add more flags to your game and add a flag that is called garden gnome, one that is called butterfly, and depending on the choice here, you put other cards into play where you refer to the name of the cat, for instance. I'll just pick the icon here, and for now we just leave it like that. I just want to show it how the flag is working here. Okay, and we have here now created 5 cards. Of course, to make the game fun, you should add more. So a very important step is to define what are the winning conditions of your game, what are the losing conditions of your game. And that depends, of course, on the resources you have within your game. So you have an end card here, as you can see, the last step of the game, and you have end cards here. So this card comes into play when every card here is played and there are no conditions that would trigger these cards. So, of course, it's very important to also have an end card here. So I just type in the end and save the card. And here, I'll define a card. For instance, that comes into play, that ends the game when you lose all your money. And as a condition, you can define that your resource, money, for instance, is less or equal to 0. And of course, you can add another winning condition, for instance, that your blog is very, very popular. You can add the condition that the popularity should be 100, so that's our maximum value. What you can also add is another condition in order to create this winning condition. For instance, you need also a good gardening know-how to reach that. Of course, that's now a bit more difficult to have this end condition. Of course, you can create as many end cards as you want here and define different conditions. And for a proper game, you would probably add more random cards here as well. Let's have a look at the game now. This is, of course, the first card, the intro card. And now the random cards come into play. So here I can decide what my next block entry is about. I'll say Raspberry Pi. My popularity increased, my gardening skills went up, and I lost a bit of money. You can also see what's going on in the game here, but you can also hide that. That's especially meant to be a help for the developers to see what's going on within your game. So here's the question on whether you want to start a marketing campaign for your blog. Let's just do that. Try to increase your popularity with that. And actually your popularity went up a little bit, but the campaign costs a fortune. And that was also our condition for this end card, the bankrupt card. So we have 0 money left, and now the game ended. I'll just start it again. And now, okay, I want to start this marketing campaign now. And here I can show you that if you adopt the garden cat, you can see here also that the flag cat is true. And now, because you adopted the garden cat, this card comes into play with the condition that the flag cat is true. And now I can name my cats. So I can choose whether I want to buy a 3D printer or a watering system. Let's buy a 3D printer. And then let's log about Raspberry Pi. And here I can choose whether I want to buy rainbow colored tomato seeds or not, because I found them on eBay. Okay, let's buy them. And yeah, I learned that there are no actual rainbow colored tomato seeds, so that's a classic fake news story. But I blogged about my experience with that and increased my popularity. And now we have the default end card, because there are no cards left within the game, and the default card comes into play. Okay, I think now you know how the random mode of the game creator works, and you can get started with your own first game. And if you want to have a look at that game and work on it further, you can do that now, because I now upload it into our cloud. Before you upload a game, make sure you go to the settings and define whether you want to allow others to edit your game and publish their own version of it, or if you want to just show your game to others and make it playable. In any case, your game is available as an open educational resource after you publish it. So just click on Editable if you want others to be able to download your game and edit it. Don't worry, even if they edit your game, they won't edit the original version of your game, and your version of your game will always stay as you uploaded it. Click on Save. And now we can upload the game. So I want to make it available for you to play it and to work on it further. So I go to Publish your game and click on Upload. Now, when you go to the menu, you see now you have in your game list two versions of the game. One is your local game and one is the cloud game. And this is the game that others can find when they go and search for games. When they go, in this case, to the category biology, then they will be able to find the game and download it.